You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima.
Good morning, Justin.
Good morning, Allison. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm good. A lot has happened here in the last week.
Yeah?
Short versions. Number one.
Okay.
Because it's only a 45-minute long episode.
Right.
So the short versions are Sean had more skin cancer surgeries this week. So that was just like a reoccurring theme.
Mm-hmm.
So he's all bruised and sore and bandaged and all that stuff. And it's just, ugh. And then while we were there, they took 4 more biopsies. So that will likely turn into more. So just more of the same.
I'm sorry.
Which does not mean it gets easier.
No.
But that happened. But another interesting thing that happened in our family is that last week, my aunt who was here visiting for the holiday month had a stroke while she was here in town.
Oh, no.
And is staying with my parents, and just a few minutes away from us. And so we were sort of part of the okay, we need to get her to urgent care. We need to, now she's at the ER. Now she's inpatient. And she's actually was inpatient at the same hospital that Sean always goes to, which is like a whole extra layer for me. So she's out of the hospital now, but now there's just an interesting new thing that's happening in our family with my mom now being her primary caregiver and then us being sort of in the next ring of support and caregiving. And so we're not quite sure yet what that's all going to turn out and look like. But it's just another layer of caregiving. And there have been moments in the week where I've been like, I am uniquely qualified to be supporting my family in this way.
Right. Yeah.
And also here's another, because, we talk about sandwich caregiving, which is parents, kids. And I always joke that I'm sandwich with a side of chips because I got Sean.
Yeah.
I don't know what the aunt would be. The pickle? I don't know.
Yeah.
Something. Right.
Right.
So yeah. So more caregiving going on here in my extended family now. So anyway, that's something that happened this week. So I'm sure that in the future we'll catch up more on what that ends up looking like long term.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a new immediate thing that's happening. So
right.
Yeah. Yeah. But you had a much more exciting week than that. Tell me what happened to you this week.
Well, I had a birthday this week and I turned 40.
Da, 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 da.
So I am now, I guess, solidly a middle-aged individual.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't feel any different. I didn't have all of this, these big feelings about turning 40 and getting old. And it's cliche, but I don't know. It feels like it's just a number kind of. I don't know. I still feel young-ish. I think one of the things so I've been kind of introspective kind of thinking, turning 40 and kind of where am I at? Where did I think I was going to be at? And certainly, 10 years ago, I would not have pictured life looking like this as it does now, which there's feelings around that. But I think one of the things that kind of with how the passing of time or something feels is it feels like when Sarah got sick, kind of I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but our life kind of stopped as far as the milestones and all of that.
Yeah.
And so yes, I'm 40 years old, but we're still kind of just in this moment as our life progressed where it just kind of stopped.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so I think there's something there where it doesn't feel like we don't have kids that are now shockingly going into middle school or something, and things like that make us feel old.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just been a lot of kind of thinking about life and thinking about how, what life has been for the past. I should at some point look back at a calendar and know exactly what year kind of I quote unquote became a caregiver, because I'm always it feels like 8-ish years or something like that.
But how long do you keep saying 8 years, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, probably maybe it's 9 now. I don't know. But looking back on that, the ups and downs of that, and when Sarah was doing really, really bad, and I was in the thick of it, and caregiving was all felt like it was the all consuming identity of who I was and what I was doing, and kind of I don't know, been thinking a lot about the ebbs and flows of the last number of years. And I think too, the other thing that pops up is it all started around the holidays.
Oh,
with the first Christmas was, it was a couple days before Christmas. Sarah had her horrendous migraine, and we took her to the ER, and like we were there for hours. And then like we missed my family's Christmas thing on like Christmas morning. And I was just like, she was sleeping. I was home, basically like home alone on Christmas morning. And so like, there's kind of like those memories kind of hang a little bit too. So it's just a little bit of a weird time, but also like it was a great day turning 40. And Sarah like really like went all out to make it feel like special and meaningful. And it just was really, that part of it was really great. So
ooh, you just unpacked. That was a lot you just dropped there.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to figure out where to even begin, because
what
you just
thread
said
to pick up.
Yeah, because you just said so many incredible things. One quick one I want to pull out is when you said 10 years ago, that triggered for me that today is the 10-year anniversary of Sean's bone marrow transplant.
Oh, wow. Today. Wow.
Which I just realized when you said 10 years. So that's where I was 10 years ago. When we think about,
like all that's tied up in the holidays kind of for you too, a little bit.
I mean, we spent that Christmas just like in the hospital, and he was like, I remember on Christmas Eve, he was like hallucinating, and it was like the C team was on staff because everyone was at home. And I was like, is it okay that he's hallucinating? And they're like, I'm sure it's fine. And, all those things. So, so as we think back, like 10 years ago, where did we think we would be? That was where we were 10 years ago. And oh my gosh, the things that have happened since then. So many things. Let me think about where I want to even start. I think, well, let's go there. And if you don't mind, let's go like 12 years back, because then that was at a time that both of us were not yet caregivers.
Right.
So like 12 years ago, when did you have a picture about like when you thought about you turning 40, when, in the future?
Yeah.
What would you have imagined or guessed?
I mean, I think the big thing is like we would have a family, and going through that like typical family raising experience, we'd probably have a house or something and be living there. Not, it wouldn't have been Sarah being chronically ill, us not having kids and living with her parents.
Yeah. Do you think, I know you guys used to travel a lot. Like, is that something that you would have been like, we would have been?
Yeah, we absolutely. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, because back before she got sick, that was always something we wanted to do more of. We wanted to like go explore with our family, with our kids.
Yeah.
Those were things we wanted to do. Yeah, for sure.
How about your job? Is there anything with your job that you feel like would be different if you hadn't ended up being a caregiver?
I don't think so. I think like I feel very fortunate and lucky with how like I landed my job out of college, and like it was a good fit, and I've been able to just consistently stay there. And
that's right. You've been in the same company since college?
Yeah, and hopefully I can just keep riding that out and then retire and, in another, 20 years. But I've also like, I know it's a real, like culturally, it's a big thing where like your job defines you kind of. It's really, that's kind of, what do you do is the big question that gets asked. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like I've never been like that. Like my job is who I am. And I don't know that. And also like, I'm not the like super ambitious, gotta like work hard and like rise up in the company kind of like mentality either. And so I don't know that from a work perspective, I think I wouldn't have had, the times when work is stressful and then caregiving is extremely stressful.
Right.
Those kind of like times when life was extra hard.
Right. But it's not like there were like promotional opportunities or things like that you like missed out on, or
not that I feel like I've missed out on. No.
Okay.
Not in that area.
Yeah. When I think about like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Let me think. Let's do some math. So Maya was here and had been here like 6 months, 12 years ago. Okay. And I think a big thing was that at that point, like Sean was rising up in his role. And so I think we were just sort of watching him sort of like move up the ladder and like, what's that going to look like? We had a plan for multiple adoptions.
Right.
And so I don't know if at that point, probably we hadn't started the paperwork yet, but at some point between then and the time that he was diagnosed, we started the paperwork to get 2 more kids. So that was like, it was never in our imagination that we would have 1.
Yeah.
child. And I think for me, I'm trying to remember, I think I was in that job and I think, I don't know that I ever had a picture of like, okay, I hope to someday be this role or whatever.
Right.
But I do know that along the way, there were lots of opportunities for like bigger positions or a lot of travel. Like, oh, we need someone to go to Florida to train these people. And I was like, yeah, no,
Right.
and I don't feel necessarily like sad about that at this point, because I think when I was asked, it felt like so out of the scope of reality that it was like, oh no, certainly I'm not going to go do that.
Yeah.
But in some ways it seems shinier,
Yeah.
But now I think about like the job that I have now, and how like, obviously I would not be a caregiver advocate if this hadn't happened, and so, and I think that I'm in such a better place to not be like in the rat race and to be doing something that I feel like is so like meaningful and uses all my skills and all of that stuff. And so that's pretty crazy to think about that, like all of those opportunities plus caregiving led me to this place.
Yeah.
Which I could have never guessed. Like I would have never pictured this 12 years ago because it didn't exist. And I don't even know if I knew the word caregiver at that point,
Yeah.
But it is interesting to think about like what would I have guessed? I think the big thing would be like Sean working and more kids in the house.
Right. Yeah.
And in some ways I have thought about that because I see people with piles of kids and I see people with both adults working, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's chaotic and they don't always have like the time. Like I feel like sometimes, I'm not trying to bright side it, this is just like the reality that I see is that like we do have like a quieter, cozier, more meaningful life because it's just like the three of us, and because he isn't working, and because I like travel less and all that stuff, that I feel like we're here with each other having this more like much more meaningful pace and connection than I think we would have if we had just all been like, oh yeah, here we go, we're all fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking, you brought up how now, the job you're in now is like you're a caregiver advocate, or I don't know all the words you use to describe what you're doing now, but like caregiving is a big part of like your identity at this point, right?
Yep.
And like one of the things that I've found over the years is there have been times when, and these are probably times when like, these are low points, I would say, is like when I lost myself in caregiving, kind of like when Sarah was doing really bad and it's like, I'm just doing everything I can to stay afloat and I'm exhausted and there's no time or energy left for anything else. And it's just like caregiving is all that I have and am. And it's just, that's the existence. And that's hard. And that doesn't feel like that's not how I think things should be.
Right.
I think that as caregivers, we should, we deserve to be like complete people and like have experiences and have hobbies and have all of that. And that's sometimes that just feels like, wow, that's wishful thinking. How could that ever happen?
Right. Yes, we deserve it. And is it realistic for us?
Right. But to bring that back around, like your job now is like caregiving. So how do you relate to like caregiver as an identity versus like pieces of your life that are not you as caregiver?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's been a couple moments where I've been like, whoa, like now that I've stepped into this, which I love, like every part of my day is somehow related to this topic. Like there isn't escaping. There isn't no escaping it. I mean, in some ways it feels like a kind of a nice encompassing. So like if we have this really hard day and we're at the doctor's office, Sean's always like, fodder, here's some fodder for you,
Yeah.
Or I feel like it helps me better understand, like it helps me do my job better because now I just have more experiences. Right. So it sort of feels like a kind of a nice, like I'm drawing a circle in the air, like a nice kind of connection between the two. And I will say that there have been moments where I'm like, I don't want to think about any of this caregiving stuff, but yet here it is everywhere,
Right.
And I think it's interesting because before, when I had this other 40-hour-a-week job in the education world, like the caregiver advocacy was like my hobby. So it would be like, it's Saturday morning and I'm going to do some writing.
Right.
And I'm going to write about this thing. And so it's interesting now that it's more like, oh no, this is the thing that I do during the week. And And so that is great because it has brought me way more balance. And sometimes then I'm like, wait a minute, if my hobby is now my job, what is my hobby?
Right.
Do I have like an extra thing? Like, what do I do? Because, my hobby is apparently Winston, who just wanted to make himself known.
Hi, Winston.
Hi, Winston. He is my hobby. So I think that when you talk about that, like, I just actually saw something the other day about like how women often do this, but I think men do it as well. Is like when they say like, tell me about yourself, that we use these labels. Like we say,
right.
I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a caregiver, I'm a teacher, I'm a, advocate, whatever. But those are roles that we play. And what about when one of those roles goes away?
Right.
Like I'm already starting getting a little weepy about the fact that in 2.5 years, Maya's going to college.
Oof.
I know. So we don't need to dwell there.
No.
But like, and certainly it's not like I'm not a mom when she's gone.
Yeah,
but like
right.
it will be like my daily life will be different. Or, I mean, this is tragic to bring up, but the reality is that at some point, like I might be a widow, right? And so like, then that means I wouldn't be a caregiver and I wouldn't be a wife, right? And so if those are my 3 big identities, like what? And so I think it's like, how can we, like you said, I think our world is so focused on what do you do?
Yeah.
I think that's a question. I hate that question because like somebody like Sean can't answer that in the way that people expect him to. We put too much weight on that. But I think even when we bring that out to our other roles, as opposed to like our hopes and our desires and our hobbies and our dreams and our whatever, it puts us into these boxes that sort of help make, like, it loses what we are and it turns it into what we do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, one of the things, I mean, what I see is interesting, and you've made what I guess was sort of your hobby is, caregiver advocacy, which is as far as hobbies go, like what a like way to better the world through your hobbies.
Oh, thank you.
My hobbies are, much more self-fulfillment versus that. But anyway, like I've found, particularly before the world went sideways and the pandemic hit and I was working from home, when I was working in the office, like there was clean division between like, I was home, I was a caregiver, I was at work, I wasn't a caregiver.
Yeah.
And like, that was one area where I had like, where it felt like I wasn't on as a caregiver. And that was like a way, not that I was making like my job my whole identity, or like that it was this super like, this is, the one thing that defines me when someone asks what you do.
Yeah.
But it was a realm that was independent of like the caregiving space. And that, when I had to start working from home, that was one of the things that was really difficult, is it felt like suddenly the caregiving just like took over, because like I'm now here in it all day, every day.
I'm picturing like a watercolor painting and all the colors just like blurring together.
Totally. And that was hard. And now I guess I found the balance there. But yeah, I will say that right now, like it is feeling more on the end of like caregiving is kind of the like dominating like role of who I am and what I'm doing. And I think a big part of that right now is like being burned out and just not having the energy or motivation or drive to like pursue hobbies, because I've always been like a big hobby person. And whether that's been like when Sarah was early on sick, I was doing like a lot of fly fishing. And so I could, she was sleeping a lot just with her head and her pain and all of that. And so I could get away in the morning for a couple hours on the weekends and go fish. And like, I did a lot of like grieving and processing and all of that, like standing in the water fishing. And that was like a really important like time for me. And then like it's been times when things changed and I couldn't get out as much, but I've done like, carving spoons and woodworking and different things like that. And now I'm going out birding and things like that. And so I've always had a broad range of like hobbies, and they've always been important, particularly like a lot of the ones that center around getting out into nature as ways of like, they help with processing, I think, and getting away and getting perspective and all of that. And so it's difficult right now when it's a little more work to kind of like force myself to get out and do that kind of stuff, I guess.
I love hearing, I hadn't heard that you used to do fly fishing. That's awesome. But I love hearing how your hobbies have sort of changed with the caregiving. So you aren't like, fly fishing is my only thing.
Right.
Now I can't leave the house, and so I'm doomed. Right. You're like,
right.
I can do these spoons in my house or in your workshop or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like without leaving. And so it's impressive that you've been able to sort of find things that go along with the season that you're in so that you still have something.
Right.
You know? And I think it sounds like the ones that you have are just sort of like lovely, meditative, quiet, you know, which works for you. Like that might not work for everybody, but like when it was a really powerful image when you said that like you spent time grieving and processing with your feet standing there in the water, you know, like, and I'm just glad that you had those. I mean, you know my thoughts on self-care, but that's some good self-care there, my friend. That, and I like that you've found ways to make it like realistic and work for you in the moment, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you said that, like, at this point, you feel like the caregiving role is bigger than any other role. But from where I sit, it seems like, so Sarah's doing quite well, right? There have been other times that you're like the responsibilities have been bigger. But right now you feel like that role is bigger. And so, but is that due to just more like, it sounds like overall you're just like tired.
Yeah.
And so unable to do the hobbies. It's not so much that the caregiving thing is so big. It's just that you don't have the energy to do the other things. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so. Like kind of the like mental picture is like there's the like circle that is me and what I'm able to do is smaller right now. And so like caregiving is a piece there's a thing inside that circle, right?
Yep.
And so right now, because I'm just so burned out, that circle of like my capacity is so much smaller.
Yeah.
And so caregiving just takes up such a bigger piece of that. Yeah. Whereas like even, you know, there have been times when Sarah's certainly doing worse where I've had more capacity. And so it, you know, whereas maybe even the caregiving piece is somewhat bigger, but there's been room for other things within that, if that kind of makes sense.
That's a powerful image. I love that. Like picturing you, like, this circle, and like your circle, the circle that is you, expands and contracts, but the caregiving circle is always in there.
Right.
So sometimes it like crowds out because your circle is smaller and the caregiving thing is always big. It crowds out room for other things.
And the caregiving thing is like the one thing that like always has to remain in the circle, or, you know, sometimes it feels like it's bigger than the circle that is me.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good.
But like feels like the one non-negotiable thing that like has to be there. Yeah.
Oh, that's a really powerful image. Because I think too, like, you know, your job is, I mean, obviously caregiving is more important, but your job is pretty non-negotiable. You know what I mean?
Well, that's
for the most part, you got to keep showing up there too. And so I'm just picturing like it's even more crowded out in there, right? The spoons are just sitting over here in the corner like, hey, what about me, guys? You know, like there's no room for the spoons in the circle right now. Oh, it makes me think a little bit too about, I think it was last time we were talking about being an empath.
Yeah.
And, you know, as caregivers, we often see other people who are struggling. And I'm always like, I should help them too, you know? And this is a balance I'm going to have to now find in myself now that there's a new member of my crew who needs support. But is there sometimes when I feel like my circle, to use your beautiful analogy, my circle is big enough that I'm like, oh, I've got it in me to go walk their dog for them, or I've got it in me to like go have a coffee with Ever or whatever. And I have to remind myself that that's not always the case, right?
Yeah.
That there are times that my circle isn't big enough. I think this circle, you know, I'm super visual, so this circle is going to be helpful to me.
Oh, good.
In the future. Thank you. You should trademark that real fast.
Oh no, it's for everyone.
But for me to picture, like, as I see other people who need support, to be like, okay, Allison, but how's your circle right now? Like if it's already packed full, and if it's already like there isn't enough room for the things that are already in there, like don't try to add another thing. Yeah. You know, which is hard.
Yeah.
But I think that visual actually is going to be helpful. I think the hard thing though, isn't it so hard that like when you think about, it's the things that fill your bucket that get like kicked out of the circle first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're in this like burnout space, and something that
Mm-hmm.
might help is something that's like now out of the circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that's something I've been talking to my therapist about a lot, is like, there's these big things that feel like they would be helpful that, like mentally I always jump to, like, I'm feeling burned out, like I need like a 3-month sabbatical.
Right.
Which
Sounds
is like,
great.
right, sounds incredible, but like right now, like I can't, go sit on a beach for 3 months. Like that's just not a realistic thing to do.
I think we need to do the podcast on location
Okay.
somewhere tropical.
That'd
for
be
3
nice.
months.
That'd be
do
good.
that. Yeah,
Okay.
okay, great.
But somehow trying to reframe the like, clearly that's something that's not accessible to me right now. Like that's not an option right now. But and even like there are days where, yeah, picking up and carving a spoon feels like I just don't have the like motivation to do that.
Yeah.
But like shrinking it down to like a small level, like, making a choice to, I don't know, get up from my desk while I'm working and like walk across the house and like move, and you know, little things that I know are helpful throughout the day, and recognizing and like intentionally doing small things. And like it's I don't know, it in the moment it doesn't seem like that's going to make a difference, but I think that there's a mindset, I'm hoping, I guess, that there can be a mindset shift that helps. Like, yes, there are things that I want to maybe be able to do to help, these big things that I can't do. Like, okay, let's set those aside and let's focus on what I can do, what I do have the energy for, even if that seems like real small. And that hopefully over time, like doing those small things that are helping in little ways, slowly my circle can kind of start expanding a little bit, and then having more room for stuff. And
I love it.
I guess we'll see how that goes. But
well, it's just like how I said at the beginning about like you have adapted your hobbies over the time to meet you where you are. And so you might be in a phase of finding something new. You know what I mean? And even if it's not a hobby, I think these little, like you said, just like walking across the house or doing, little things, so that it doesn't have to be like, it's always got to be birding, or it's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have it in me right now, but to see those little tiny things, those micro moments that we talk about is something that could be supportive of you, either in expanding your circle so you could get back to some of the hobbies you've done before, or maybe it's like a new hobby and it's a tiny one, that doesn't take a lot of energy. Yeah. Something I want, because you said that sometimes the caregiving circle is bigger than the Justin circle. Right. And we talk a lot here about like claiming this, right? That a lot of caregivers don't claim, like, they don't call themselves caregivers. And what is the power in calling yourself that and claiming it and all that stuff, right? And so I think that both of us, tell me if I'm wrong, but both of us are strong advocates for the power in that, in claiming that title. But I'm wondering too, as we're talking about this, like, how do we find the balance between claiming it, but not getting lost in it, not turning it into like, hi, I'm Allison, I'm a caregiver. And that's who I am. And then they're like, well, tell me something else about you. I'm like, I don't know. I'm lost in that. Like, this is all I am, right? How do we find the balance there? Because we don't want to throw it away because there's power in it. And we could get lost if that's all we sort of cling to. You know what I mean? Whether because it's like, that's where we hang our hat, or because it's just so big that it's all that we do, or both.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there are absolutely times where it's like lost in it because situationally it's so intense. And like, I mean, that's a tragedy that's the case, that like that one part of our life is so all consuming in those moments. And I don't know, because I do think that, I think I said it earlier, but like we deserve to be like complete people, and like caregiving being the one and only and all consuming thing, like isn't that doesn't allow us to be that. And there's probably times when, we're not able to kind of expand beyond that. And that's difficult and hard and like for those of you that are there, like, I'm sorry, that's a real struggle, and I've been there. And then there are also times when I think caregiving is less all consuming, but it's whether it, because it, like, momentum wise, it's just who we are and what we've been doing for so long that it's just like, well, I'm a caregiver.
Yeah.
And like, there's so much, whether it's like habit's not quite the right word, but we've just been doing the same thing for so long. It's like muscle memory. It's like, well, like, this is what I am. This is what I do.
Right.
And I think I would hope that there would be ways for you to branch out and kind of rediscover who you are as a person, like out beyond just yourself as a caregiver.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, because you said, this is what I am, this is what I do. And I'm just sort of thinking about those verbs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Am versus do. And so I just think that's interesting to think about. Like, so if I picture this circle, the circle that is Allison. So I think about, like, so some other bubbles that are in there. There's a caregiver bubble. There is a wife bubble. There is a mom bubble. There's, you know, a friend, a writer, an advocate, a podcaster, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder too, like, about, those are nouns. And I just wonder about, like, should adjectives, I don't know, like.
Yeah, totally.
You know, like, what are other things that aren't about what I do, but what I am? And so, like, you were just telling me, I hope it's okay that I share this, but that one of your nieces in a birthday card said that you're not selfish.
Yeah.
That she sees you as a person who is not selfish, which I think is beautiful that she can see that in you. And so, like, that's a quality of you, right? That I'm sure ekes into all of your roles. But it's like a quality that is you.
Yeah.
That even if you quit your job tomorrow or whatever, like, that will still be you.
Right.
Right. And so I wonder, like, if it's a qualities thing that we can also focus on so that we don't lose ourselves, even as all the role bubbles take over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that's a really interesting, like, thought exercise to think about, because like, kind of what I've been stuck on, I don't know if stuck on, but like talking about is like when caregiving is like the dominant, like, thing, not having room for these other things that you do. And like that being the struggle, because it's like you want to be complete and be able to do a more variety of things, but to just think about from the perspective of, okay, like, caregiving is something that I am doing. And right now it might be all that I'm doing. But like, okay, but to think through, okay, who am I? Like, what are those qualities? And like, you can then, I think, I don't know, maybe through that you can get a picture of who you are that's not a caregiver. And maybe a lot of those traits are like tied into yourself as a caregiver, but like, that's one way those traits are being used, but like, they're at a higher level than like the caregiving.
Yeah. I love that. So if I think about it, and you said it's like a thought exercise, like, it makes me want to, like, pull out a whiteboard.
Yeah.
But like, so if we say, like, it's like, I'm Justin, I am not selfish.
Right.
Right. And then you could get into things like, I feel restored by nature, or I love watching for birds, or you know what I mean? Like, because I wonder if those things also might lead us to some of those hobbies, like some of those activities that we could do to be like, oh yeah, I do really, like, for you to think, oh, all three of my things that I've listed are related to nature. Like, what does that tell me about, like, maybe a teeny tiny hobby I can be doing right now?
Right.
That's more realistic.
Well, and that's like something I've kind of like through sort of, I guess, things like that is like the realization. I think this was in therapy at some point back when it was in person, and like my therapist's office had like this window overlooking the bay, and just being like, I really find peace in being able to just like take an observational posture and just like watch the world kind of. And like that can also manifest in whether that's, you know, birding or like out fishing and being in the nature there. But it's something I can do sitting at my desk at home, is I can just, you know, lean back and just kind of like look out at the world for even 30 seconds. And that's helps kind of as a mind shift.
I keep thinking like, oh, you're so fortunate because you live in such a beautiful place. But really, like, all of us could be doing that, like, regardless of where we live, right?
Yeah.
You know, like staring outside for 30 seconds or taking a walk and noticing things or whatever. And also that might not fill everybody's bucket. I think it's like for you to say, how did you say that I find peace in taking an observational posture or something? And so I just think for all of us to sort of do that thought exercise of, you know, even like that, finish that sentence for ourselves. Like I find peace, ... I feel at my best when I ...
Could be you have a notebook and like you do some doodling and like do a quick little drawing for, you know, a minute and then go back to what you're doing. I don't know. Like
Right.
Small things.
And I think so for us to just start to notice like, who are we as beings? And I don't know if you like, it's like we're like a beer instead of a doer, you know what I mean? And so like, and I've heard that it's like, we're not human doers, we're human beings. Right. And so like, what is it? What are those things that make up us, each of us, so that we can try to hold on to those and see how those show up in a caregiving moment, but also in a non-caregiving moment, so that we can sort of maintain our identity, even as we claim this role.
Right.
But the role is separate from our identity.
Yeah.
Or alongside, or you know what I mean? Like it's its own thing.
For sure.
I'm thinking too, because like, you know, for our supporters who are listening, you know, we often talk about like, okay, make sure that you say to the caregiver, like, how are you? Right. Like, reach out to them too. And so I think sort of a piece here, because supporters are probably a little whiplash, like, well, wait, now are we not supposed to say that? So I think supporters to realize that yes, it's great to say like, I know that you're a caregiver and that's really hard. You know, I'd like to bring you dinner, whatever that is. And to help the caregiver remember, and for you to remember that that's only one circle of the caregiver's life. And so to be able to say to the caregiver, like, hey, how's your job going? Or, hey, have you watched anything cool lately? Like, you know, questions like that recognize and shine light on the fact that they are a multifaceted person.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that.
And so even to say like, hey, I'm wondering like, and this is for people who are potentially going to see people in the next couple of weeks at gatherings, you know, you can say something like, hey, do you want to talk? I know you're a caregiver and that's a lot. Is that something you want to talk about tonight? Or would you rather talk about like what shows you've been watching lately?
Yeah.
You know, to give them sort of the option to say like, I see that this is part of your life and I see that there's other parts and that you might not want to talk about that. And so I kind of like the option piece.
For sure.
Because if somebody walked up and was just like, hey, what shows you've been watching? I might be like, do you realize my husband just had surgery?
Yeah.
You know? Or I might be like, I don't want to talk about that surgery anymore. Can we talk about something else? And so I think giving somebody the option just shows them that like, hey, I see you and I see that there's multiple parts of you in your life.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this was like a masterclass in something. I don't know, but I think you dropped a lot of wisdom here today, my friend.
Well, thank you.
I think that circle thing is going to stick with me because I think that's
good.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your, because again, I feel like my mind is going 100 miles a minute right now with all the stuff we just talked about. Do you have any like succinct takeaways or summaries from today? Because I feel like covered a lot of ground.
I don't know. I think like that circle thing just kind of was something that came to me in the moment, and I'm going to be thinking about that more. And I think thinking about the little things in small ways that I can like find space for activities outside of caregiving based on the amount of, or the capacity that I have.
Yeah.
And focusing on small things. I think that, and I think thinking through like who I am versus what I do. I think that's something I'm going to be thinking about a little bit too.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how that's going to like change my life. But I think that feels like a helpful thing to go through to get a different perspective. I think especially when things feel overwhelming and like caregiving is dominating and like this singular thing that I am doing.
Yeah. You know, you're lucky because since you just had this birthday, I bet you have a lot of birthday cards sitting around.
I do.
Or a lot of people I bet reached out or said things. And so it might be a nice opportunity for you to just like sort of look through those and see like what are the like you know, you're just saying you're not selfish, right?
Right.
Like what are sort of the compliments that people gave and the things that they see in you that maybe you haven't paid attention to might be kind of a nice list to be like, oh wow, I guess I am really this.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I do really do that, you know?
That's a great idea.
You're lucky that you've got a stack of birthday cards sitting there.
I'm halfway there.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, well, thank you for that perspective and for that visual. Yeah.
No, this was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was. It was. See, your 40th birthday, it, sprouted all new things. Look at you. I bet you wouldn't have come up with that circle thing when you were 39.
No, not a chance.
No way. But now that you're wise, older.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, my friend, always good talking to you.
Yeah. It's always great.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.